Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the part 8 of Perspectives with a Black Man, our series on race and racism. Today, we are excited to have with us, Black male educators to talk about educating our Black boys and Black men. And so I'm really excited to have the panelists that we have on today. I have had the outstanding opportunity and privilege to get to know each and every one of our panelists in different ways. And so I want to get a chance to begin introducing them. As I said before, as always, our series is focused on Black males and our perspectives, but specifically our voices, our experiences, and our solutions. And so today we're going to talk about the field of education. So first we have one of my good friends from college, Mr. Humphrey. Mr. Humphrey teaches in Ann Arbor, and he actually serves as a principal, elementary school principal in Ann Arbor, and he's been in education for 13 years. So welcome, Mr. Humphrey, and it's good to see you, and welcome to the show.
Hey, appreciate it, Dr. Akbar. Thanks for having me.
No problem, absolutely.
All right, so thanks for having me. I am originally from Saginaw, Michigan, which is about an hour and a half north, 30 minutes away from Flint. I graduated from EMU, got my undergrad there. I have 2 masters as well, one master's in curriculum and instruction, another master's in educational leadership. I graduated in 2007, and I've been in education ever since, loving every day of it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I appreciate everything that you've done. The funny thing, before I go ahead and introduce everyone, we had a class together in undergrad. It was called Social Foundations of Education. And I was like in love with that class. And you were like, you love this a little too much. But it ended up being, you say again?
I remember it clear as day.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, this is like the world has just opened. The Pandora's box is amazing. And I ended up getting my PhD in that. So it's kind of interesting how the world kind of turns. So yeah, thank you for all those conversations. So next we have Mr. Cooper. He is also in education. He's been in education for 11 years. He's serving his 4th year as an elementary school principal, and he's in St. Paul, Minnesota. So, Mr. Cooper, welcome to the show. And I also know you from college as well, and I know you as my fraternity brother and chapter brother. So, EH is in the building.
That's right, Pro-Fight. Yeah, once again, I'm Keno Cooper, originally from Inkster, Michigan. I graduated from Eastern Michigan with my undergrad in elementary education in 2008. Then shortly after that, I moved out to Minnesota, where I got my master's in educational leadership at Concordia St. Paul, along with my administrative license specialist degree for elementary principal, also K-12. And then I'm currently at Minnesota State, Mankato, my doctoral program. And I am currently, once again, principal going into my 4th year at an elementary school in St. Paul, Minnesota. And man, I think I've done just about everything in education, my role. I started off as a specialist teacher, teaching about different cultures. I was a substitute paraprofessional, went on to be a 4th grade teacher, and then assistant principal, and right now, principal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Stevenson. He has been in education for the last 12 years. He's currently serving as principal at a new school in Jackson, Mississippi. And he's been a building level administrator for the last 9 years. So welcome, Dr. Stevenson, if you can join us. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going, Dr. Akbar?
I'm doing well. We met actually at, was it Alpha Leadership Academy?
That's correct.
Yeah, wow, okay. We met in 06 at our Leadership Academy for our fraternity for college men and leading our chapters. And so we've been friends and connected ever since. So it's always good when you can connect with someone who has similar philosophies, especially when they're dedicated educators. We can bounce things off each other. So thank you very much. And thank you also for giving me some inspiration to finish my PhD too. Because he finished first. He finished first.
Thank you for having me, though. And so just a little bit about myself. I am Charles Stevenson. I graduated from Tougaloo College, which is in Jackson, Mississippi. Originally, I thought I was going to medical school, and God had a different plan for me. I ended up teaching. And the first year I started teaching, I fell in love with it, fell in love with the students, and I knew that was my passion. And so I finished Tougaloo College, taught for a few years, and then I went to Belhaven University. I completed my master's in secondary education. And then from there, I attended Mississippi State University, where I worked on my educational specialist degree in administration. I also finished my doctorate also at Mississippi State University. I've worked at the middle school and the high school level. Secondary that's my baby, that's my heart. But this year I'm stepping out and doing something a little different. I will be a K-12 principal, and it is alternative education. And kind of working with those students who do have those discipline issues to help get them back on track.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Next, we have Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson has been in education for the last 15 years. He started off as an elementary school counselor. High school counselor. And now is a researcher at a higher ed institution. So he does a lot of research on dyslexia and special ed. So we're very happy to have him here. He's also one of my esteemed fraternity brothers.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate for the opportunity to be here with some great minds. I received my undergrad from the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, my master's in school counseling from DePaul University, and then my PhD in language and literacy from Cardinal Stritch. And right now I currently work in the WE Lab at UW-Madison, and I do a lot of research around African American boys and literacy, particularly dyslexia, 4th, 8th grade, higher ed, worked in prison. So my mission is really to help give these kids the tools they need to be successful in reading. So I'm thankful to be here with brothers who are in the trenches every day, you know, fighting for these kids and you know, giving them inspiration. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And last but not least, we have Dr. Walton. He's been in education for over 22 years. He started off as an elementary school teacher, and now he's a professor. For the last 12 years, he's been a professor, and he is just recently appointed as Director of African American Studies in Western Carolina. So we definitely want to be lucky to have him. I met him in undergrad as well. If you think that I'm radical, then blame Dr. Walton for that. Dr. Walton?
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And thank you to all the other gentlemen. Yes, I'm from Romulus, Michigan. I obtained a bachelor's degree in African American Studies from Eastern Michigan University and a master's degree in world history from Eastern Michigan University and 2 PhDs from Michigan State, one in African American and African Studies and the other in history. I started out as an elementary school teacher. I was a Michigan Educational Assessment Program re-teacher for 5th grade in my hometown of Romulus for 2 years. And then I was a permanent sub, mostly in gym, but I would make them read and teach them Black history then. Then I went on to become a community college professor. And then from there, I taught as an adjunct at Eastern Michigan University, as a standalone TA at Michigan State University, Oakland Community College, the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, and now starting this academic year, I will be a short-lived assistant professor of history. I'll be promoted to associate very soon, and the inaugural director of Black Studies at Western Carolina University. And of course, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to leave that part out. But no, all love, brother, all love. So thank you everyone for joining us today and really being a part of this discussion. So we're going to jump right in. We have some pretty big questions and topics to discuss in a short period of time. So we're going to jump right in. So all of you were once Black boys in school. And so when you think about being a Black boy in K through 12, you know, we think about the different experiences we have that may have prompted us to become educators. So I know I have a story of why I decided to be an educator. I was in special ed, and well, before I got into special ed, I was in 1st grade, and my teacher said that I was just dumb and I just wasn't going to get that reading thing. And so I said at that moment I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I wanted to be an educator because I wanted to be everything opposite of what she was. And so when you think about racism and things that you've experienced as a student in K-12, can you talk to us about some of those experiences that were could be considered microaggressions or implicit biases?
Yeah, do you mind if I start there, Dr. Akbar?
Yes, I'm sorry. I meant to introduce you, but yes, Mr. Humphrey.
All right. So I guess one of my earlier experiences is more so indirect, being so young. But once in kindergarten, you promoted to 1st grade at the end of the year, correct? But my mom was told by the school that I had to go to something called junior first, because it felt as if I was not quite ready to go to 1st grade because I was missing some fundamentals. They didn't really care to explain kind of what those fundamentals were. If you think about it now, I've never heard of since then the term junior first. It has been since deleted. And so because of that, I've always been a little bit older than my peers going from K to 12. So that's sort of my first indirect experience. Then having that story told to me kind of just prompted me to think about things a little bit differently. Sometimes you would be asked a question in middle school, for example, how did you score so well on this test? Because I studied. Well, who did you study with? I mean, just things like that. Those are just microaggressions that I think a lot of people don't often understand or get unless you experience it quite often, which if you're a hue with like mine, you tend to experience it more often than others. Those are some of my earlier experiences with racism in education.
And then to follow right up with that, Mr. Humphrey, is when I think about my educational experience, there's been numerous moments that I could go on for hours about all the different experiences that I faced and the microaggressions that I faced in education. But I mean, there's been times where, oh, well, as a Black male, you know, you should be doing this. How come, you know, you're not doing this? And oh, you're playing soccer? Why are you playing soccer and not, you know, football? So you got different little microaggressions that come. But one of the biggest things that I remember that really stuck out to me was the OJ trial. And I remember being in middle school at the time, and I saw a separation when you saw definitely a separation between Black students and white students during that whole time in that court case, and even seeing teachers feeling a certain way about it. And I said, wow, this is something. Just at that age, and just in understanding that, yeah, this is deep, you know, it gets real deep here. But I mean, I could go on and on with different things that are affected and microaggressions, but that's just one instance that sticks out.
Yeah, so for me, I actually attended kindergarten through 12th grade. It was a predominantly white school district. The school that I was in was predominantly white. And so I didn't see a lot of teachers who looked like me really until I got to high school. And so that was kind of difficult. But one of the biggest things that I remember was in middle school. It was the Algebra 1 class. It was in 8th grade. I was the only African-American Black in the class. And I was asked so many times, how did you end up in here? Or don't you want to go back to the regular math? As if I was not good enough to be in that class with the other students. And then another incident I remember was when I was in high school, I was selected to be drum major. And apparently for years, there had not been a Black drum major, if there had even been one. And the question was always asked, why did y'all get a Black to be the head drum major? Why not just let him be the assistant? As if I wasn't good enough to do that either. And so it really made me question, you know, is this really for me? Do I want to have to deal with this? But one thing I always thought to myself is, I was put here for a reason. I'm just as good as the next person, no matter what my skin color is. So that was just a few of the incidents that I had to deal with.
I think for myself, like Dr. Stevenson too, you know, I went to a predominantly white school growing up in the suburbs. But before my mom moved me there, we were in a school that's pretty much diverse. And one of the things that she always told me when I was younger was, you know, I had struggled with reading. And so she was trying to get me help. And so she wanted to figure out what the special education programs were like. And she walked into the classroom and it was all Black boys. Teacher had her feet up on the table. All the Black boys were just kind of like running around. And mom was like, where's the learning taking place? And teacher's like, they don't learn. We're not learning here. You don't want to go learn. You got to go to other school, other districts. And my mom was like, wait a second. You telling me that my son is going to be in this classroom and you're not going to teach him. So I think that really, those experiences starting young really motivated me to do the work I do today about the systematic barriers that young boys face within the context of special education. So, you know, that's my passion.
Indeed. For myself, K through 12, just like several of the other brothers mentioned, I went to a predominantly white school system. For most of my K through 12 in Romulus, Michigan, 60% white, 40% Black. But I was advanced because of my father. So when I was in kindergarten, I had to go to 2nd grade to do classwork all the way up through. And I would be the only Black kid in those classes that was in that accelerated type program. And the teachers would be reluctant to call on me. That was a big deal for myself. I scored perfect 100% on my first 3 MEP tests and won awards from the governor of Michigan. And every time I went to get my award in Lansing, they never had a plaque for me. And I had to share a plaque for the photos with a white student who didn't score 100%, but like 99%. And that definitely impacted me and made me want to always outperform white students in the classroom. And when my parents got divorced, I had to go to Detroit public schools for 2 years for 5th grade and part of 6th grade. And I was doing 5th and 6th grade work when I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade. And I had to go to those classrooms in Romulus to do that. And they held me back. So I had extreme disciplinary problems because I could finish the homework in 3 seconds and then go crazy in the classroom. And they were trying to convince my mom I needed to get special attention because I had behavioral problems. And in high school, lastly, I'll give you an example. I was in the 12th grade and it was a English class and I knew all the answers because I had read all those books years before. My father made me read them and I would raise my hand, I got the answer and the teacher wouldn't call on me. And one day I spazzed out and just got them threw a book at them. And, you know, they wanted to kick me out of school and all that, but I had already been admitted to college with a scholarship and had my schedule. So my mom told me to hell with them. So senior year, I probably went to school maybe once or twice every other week. It was just terrible. So that's my experience with racism, K through 12 education as a student.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for answering that question. It seems like we've all have had multiple experiences, and it kind of tells us that there's something that we should be doing in our schools, right? And more specifically, you know, I can relate to how reading, for example, affected me and my abilities because I was a slow learner when it came to reading. But we also see broader issues with reading and literacy. So I'm wondering if I can just ask you as current educators in school systems and doing research in these areas, can you talk about the relationship between reading, racism, and the school to prison pipeline? Mr. Humphrey?
Yeah. So my perspective is coming from early elementary. That's my experience. So my perspective is at the very least, the very basic foundation. If I don't see myself in books, then why am I motivated to read? If I see in this book a bunch of kids and families that look nothing like me, that share no experiences that I share, then what motivations do I have to read? If I don't have any motivations, then I may start doing things other than reading. So I may start acting out. I may start doing things differently. So for me, the most basic foundation is making sure that students are able to see themselves, their cultures represented in picture books. And it doesn't have to be a book about being Black or a book about being Asian. It's just a book of a family that just happens to be Black doing ordinary things, right? So for me, the basic thing is I have to first be motivated to read by seeing people that look like me. And then the connection between school to prison pipeline is if we're not providing those basic foundations, then students are not motivated to learn, and then they start acting out, and then they become suspended. Then you can't learn to read when you're suspended, and then what kind of happens from there is you definitely lose motivation. The gap is there between you and your peers. So then by the time you get to high school, you may drop out. And then from that point on, your trajectory is not where it could have been, but it's now so into the prison system. And for me, behavior is communication. And if a student is acting out in his or her classroom, then your job is not to suspend, your job is to figure out why. What is the student communicating to me? How can I then help this student? Because I need the student to succeed in life. Not that he can't read, he or she can read. how can I motivate them?
Oh man, Mr. Humphrey, you hit it right on there about finding literature that, you know, our Black males can relate to, that they see themselves in. I remember my perspective being like, even as early as first or second grade, when the teacher has the reading groups, you knew, no matter if it was this, whatever the name of the group was, you knew what reading group was the top reading group and which one was the struggling reading group. And it was something I remember looking at that like, man, I got to get in that group because they were treated differently, the books that they had. And I was like, oh man, I've got to push myself. I got to figure out a way to get in that group. And, you know, statistics show that by the time you're in fourth grade, or the way the system looks at it, they start building prisons based off of where you are at in fourth grade. So if you're failing reading in fourth grade, they start building those prisons. And that's a whole another system. I mean, that's a whole other topic we could get into with laws that needs to change. But the other thing too is that if you're in certain reading groups or certain classes, then you're out of the classroom. So then you're missing time, and you're missing important points in the classroom, and that's the thing that once again that leads to missing time. Then you're falling behind in other areas. That takes place. So reading, the school to prison pipeline, absolutely, that all goes right together. But I know you all are nodding. Yeah, I know we all remember that, man. Being in class and looking at that group, like, how they get that book, man? I want to read that book, and whatnot. But yeah, but it's just about making sure that we keep our kids in the classroom and keeping them engaged.
Yeah, so I was one of those students who hated reading in school, and it wasn't so much but because I couldn't read or the comprehension level wasn't there. I was an advanced reader. I just hated reading because why? None of the stuff we read appealed to me. It had absolutely no connection to me. And that's one thing I see now so many days. Teachers who don't look like those students, they automatically get material that it doesn't appeal. The kids cannot relate to by any means. So of course the kids begin to act out because they don't feel like they can connect to the reading material. They act out because the teacher will tell them, you know, you having problems reading, you're a struggling reader. So of course the child begins to, they don't want the spotlight on them. So of course they begin to act out. And you know, so you think so many times when you put a child on the scene, on the spot, and you know that they cannot read, then what are they going to do? They want to reflect or withdraw the attention that they cannot read. So yeah, they're going to act out, and particularly Black males, they're going to act out because what you're not going to do is embarrass me in front of all my peers. And so with the prison to pipeline, just a startling fact says that Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more than white students. And, you know, you have to think about stuff like that. We have this thing in Mississippi that's called third grade reading aid. And so by third grade, we automatically know what students struggle with reading. And if they're struggling with reading, it's automatic. Let's go ahead and hold them back. Let's do everything we can. And so that they will not excel with the rest of their classmates so that we can prepare them. Well, holding them back, if they didn't get it that year, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's preparing them to be successful. No, we got to target what the root of the problem is. Why were they not successful in reading? And why did we wait to the end of the year to understand that they could not read? And so with that prison pipeline, they started at an early age. One thing that I've noticed with working with alternative setting also is that we look at kids who are in the elementary level, and we automatically say, well, if they're causing problems at the elementary level, unless we address that problem, it's only going to progress more and more the following year. Students who have been in alternative school, who are constantly suspended, constantly missing days, of course, they're more likely to drop out. And if they're going to drop out, they cannot meet when you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if I don't have the education to sustain those needs, those major needs, the nutrition, the food, the shelter, then what am I going to do? I'm going to do anything necessary so that I can be successful in maintaining my state of being. So they're going to, steal, they're going to break in, they're going to do whatever it takes in order to survive. And that's something that we have to address early on, not waiting until we get to the high school or once they drop out. We've got to begin that at the elementary level.
Yeah, man, I feel like I'm in church right now. I agree with everything. Everyone's mentioned so far. You know, for me, I didn't learn to read till I was actually 18. I got kicked out of high school, and when I finally graduated high school, I was reading at an elementary level. And so the professor who taught me how to read, you know, said I had a gift that had been, you know, passed on when I was angry, throwing chairs at teachers, cursing at teachers, fighting kids. Because, you know, I tell people now, if you want to break a child or a grown man psychologically, just give him a book. Just give him a book in front of their peers and ask them to read. You know, it's the easiest thing to do is to break somebody. You know, when we talk about culturally responsive pedagogy and instruction, books that are relevant, that's what's needed. But even before that, you know, kids who do have a diagnosed learning disability, they do definitely need to learn the sound structure of our language, you know, given phonemes, graphemes. They really need to know how to properly decode and encode words, because we can probably give them any book they want, but if they don't know how to identify the words from left to right, well, then they're just going to continue to struggle, continue to be angry, continue to, you know, act out in class like the gentlemen before me talked about. So it's real, man. I mean, these kids are getting pushed through the system intentionally. You know, they're getting moved on, and then by the time they get to high school, it's not too late. You know, they still need some hope, but you know, it's a little bit harder than it would when they were younger to give them the right instruction, the right training, the teachers. And so, yeah, racism is real in the system. You know, in Wisconsin, they pour more money into the prison system than they do the education system, and that's backwards. Like, why would you want to pour money into the prison system when you could be saving young kids' lives by giving them the right instruction within classroom settings and preparing teachers to help them, rather than putting money into the juvenile justice system or police programs or prison system. So it's designed like that. And unfortunately, our kids get trapped in it. And, you know, if you don't have the social capital or the resources to get out, it's a dark, lonely space, and it's a place that you don't want to end up, you know, and it's a place that, you know, death, bondage, or jail or prison, and drugs. So literacy is huge. It starts young. It starts at home. It starts in school too. It's a community. And you know, as an educator myself, you know, I speak to my experiences here in Wisconsin. We got to do better. We got to start talking. We got to start putting out these statements out. We got to actually put our money where our mouth is to help these kids learn to read, because the time is now. And so, yeah, I just appreciate, you know, everyone's insight on this.
And they've hit the nail on the head. I would just want to add that some young Black males are misdiagnosed with learning disabilities because they have perceived behavioral problems, right? And that's the easy route for some teachers to then label them that. When I was a MEP read teacher, I had a student, 5th grade, brilliant kid, but he had a lot of behavioral problems because of things that was going on at home. And I taught in my small town where I grew up in, so I knew his parents and his uncles, and I knew what was going on with him at home, right? Drug addiction and things of that nature. And so he would act out because other students were making fun of him because of things that his mom was doing that they were aware of because of their older siblings who were selling drugs. I'm just going to get right to it, right? And they wanted to put this kid, they had put him on ADHD drugs, Ritalin, I think it was, and he would be a zombie in class. And I'm like, he's just going to continue to fall behind, right? And I did an intervention, not an official one. I just talked to him and his people, but I pulled him to the side and I could just relate to him and identify with him. And his behavior turned around and his performance increased because he always had those skills. So, you know, and that ties to what the suspension rate, the detention rate, because he would spaz out, right? So he would spend most of his time or far too much time in detention, in-house suspension, or being suspended at home. So they're sending him to this toxic environment that school was giving him a release and escape from, right? And literacy and understanding literacy in many ways, right? And the different types of literacies and how we can use that to help teach students. And my training with Dr. Geneva Smitherman on African-American English vernacular and using that and understanding that as students' first language, right? And just like when I learned French and Spanish and Isi Zulu, English was the base, so they would refer it to English. In English, you do this. It's different in these languages. You do it this way. So taking that approach with African-American English vernacular, that's their first language. So when they say, B's going to the store for my grandmother, they say, no, I am going to the store for my grandmother. And the student's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to communicate. And instead of them understanding that and having that training and saying, oh, that's a habitual act, the habitual B, meaning he continuously, he went yesterday, he went today, he's gonna go tomorrow in perpetuity. You know, it's just that cultural competent pedagogy, like the brother mentioned, and it's that tracking that I am extremely, extremely fearful of and angry about. Of, they're not intervening and helping these kids. They're just making it easier for these unprepared teachers by just removing them out of the classroom or doping them up.
Wow.
Dr. Akbar.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
as Dr. Walton said, man, it's toxic, and language has power, language has meaning, and a lot of these teachers don't really understand that coming within the social cultural perspective of how these kids, their environment they come from, their upbringing, if you don't respect their culture capital, you're missing out on generations of geniuses, man. You're just kind of, like you said, push them to the side, over-identify them, toxic environment, medication, and then what? We have the same conversation 2 years from now. So, yeah, right on.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for everything you've shared. I'm sitting here just like agreeing when you're talking about reading ability groups, because that I totally remember that. I was always in the D group, and I never wanted to be in the D group. And everyone knew what the D group meant, and then they would make fun of you when you came back from the D group, because A, B, and C group did it in class. D group, we went to the annex, and so that was experience that was very interesting and really hurtful too. And then there was the other thing is, the reading out loud. I mean, I remember firmly, and I wasn't really a disrespectful kid, but I had some angry moments. But I remember firmly telling one of my teachers that I'm not going to read out loud. Because I felt like she was gonna, I was gonna be embarrassed. I can't read. Why are you asking me to read out loud? So yes, so I appreciate that. And you actually led right into our next question around how do you, in your roles as a researcher or as educators, work to end this tracking of Black boys into special education. And I'm not talking about the ones like me who needed it for a few years and then were able to get out. I'm talking about tracking them into special education and keeping them there for perpetuity, really, until they got out of school. Mr. Humphrey?
I think probably the first and foremost is to educate parents. I think that they definitely have to know what the system is, what is education, what are their rights when it comes to IEPs and 504s, things of that nature. A lot of times in education, there's a bunch of educational jargon thrown around and acronyms. We can acronym people to death, and that can be intimidating as well. So I think my role is to help educate parents. If I can't do it personally, then point them in the right direction to where they walk into a room and have a firm understanding of what's being said and how to advocate for their child. Just because the school makes suggestions, it doesn't mean that you can't push back or disagree or have a different opinion. And I think sometimes if you're not used to the educational system, you might think you have no choice, right? You might think, well, this is what the experts are saying. I'm going to trust them and we're going to just go move it in this direction. It's not always a bad thing, but I think parents just have to know. You don't want to go into a courtroom without a lawyer, right? So you don't want to go to a meeting without knowing what's being shared with you in the meeting. And also I think for me is coming up with the team of experts in my building of some interventions to try in the classroom. So working with my reading specialists, working with some other special educational staff, like, hey, here's a student who's displaying this kind of behavior or academic need right now. What can the teacher try in the classroom for everyone, but it will benefit this student for sure. So it's working with a team of professionals in your building, experts in their field, to help provide interventions for the teacher to use in his or her classroom. To me, special education recommendation is an absolute last resort. We have to exhaust all other options before we even entertain that conversation.
Spot on with the interventions and also informing families. One of the other things too that's really important is having those conversations and having, teachers and your staff having those conversations about bias. There's biases out there that, I've been in situations where you can come into a meeting and you're talking about a Black male student and a white male student can then show the same behavior, and it's something else where maybe it's just this, and but this student over here is showing emotional behavior, or this Black student, and he needs this, and he needs help, he needs a paraprofessional, he needs special education. And like Mr. Humphrey said, that should be the last resort. First off, we need to check our biases. We need to take a look at our systems that we have in place at our schools. What protocols are we following before we get to that point? Are we meeting with the families? Are we taking time to get to know the students, the family, and putting things in place to help that student? Like we said, we never know what could be going on in every student, and we have to really believe that. Educators say, I believe, a kid can do everything. A kid can do all things, but then all of a sudden, if it's this kid that a Black student that you already have biases towards and things that's in your mind already made up, it instantly can, all that believe everything can go out the window, and you fall back on those biases. And instantly, as quickly this student needs to get checked for special ed, set them up with a doctor, and all these different things. So we have to address that. We have to look and make sure we're following the systems in our school with the proper interventions that are followed with fidelity too, followed to the T. And right, just like Mr. Humphrey said, we've got to make sure that, parents are informed about what's going on, because there are a lot of different acronyms that's thrown out there, and parents, it's just like, I need help, and they're going to trust. They're going to trust us. So we got to make sure that we're informing them correctly.
Yeah, I think another thing we have to look at, and Kiara actually said this in her messages. She said we have to make sure parents feel comfortable coming to the school. You got to think about it from the aspect, if I didn't have a good school experience and I didn't like school, then that's going to pull me away from going when my child needs me the most. So we got to make sure that parents feel comfortable. And so many times I hear teachers say when it comes to sending information home to parents, they say, well, I sent it home in a letter. Well, who are we to know that the parent even understands or they can read the letter? And so many times nowadays, you have parents who single parent home, who are working. And let's just be real. A lot of our Black males or black students are being raised by grandparents. Grandparents are, getting older. They don't have that same energy to focus on grandkids. Let's just keep it real, what it is. And so a lot of times they're not getting what they need at home. And so we've got to do everything we can. And then also looking at when we have these SPED meetings, you got to think about it. Most of the time you have one parent who comes and the child, and you have 6, 7, 8, 10 people sometimes sitting at a table where they're outnumbered. So most of the time the parents won't really say much. They're just going to go with what the team is saying. And so my role is to speak up and tell that parent, no, this is the last resort. Let's talk about what you can do at home. Let's talk about how I can step up and help you even at home. And just as an educator, I'm that person who, if I'm gonna have to stay late to tutor a child, I don't mind. If I'm gonna have to get to work early, I'll go without eating to sit and help a child. Like I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure a child is successful. And so we've got to make sure that we are informing the parents. We're making it comfortable for the parents to voice their opinions or to voice their concerns. Another thing I think about is when it comes to my role. Well, my role is not just an educator. when I'm in the school building. My role is an educator when I'm not in the school building. So, you know, I tell my siblings all the time, you know, take the computers away from the kids, make them read a book, sit down and work with your kids. You know, I tell my church members, you know, if you got a question, come and ask me. Your child may not go to my school, but it's still my role, my responsibility as a Black male educator to make sure that you are knowledgeable about what's going on. You know, so many times we don't speak about these things at churches. And you know, that's where a lot of grandparents are, they're bringing their kids to church. So let's use church. Let's use whatever platform we have to educate our parents. We have something that is called bottom 25%. And if you look at the statistics, bottom 25% is based off the state test. And we automatically identify kids if they score low, then they're in the bottom 25% of their peers. And we automatically say, okay, these kids are going to need extra help. We're going to need to pull them from their regular class. We're going to need to pull them from whatever it is to get them extra help. Well, are we making sure that we're focusing on the root of the problem, not just saying because they scored low on the test? Because realistically, everybody's not a good test taker. And if we're using only summative assessments to really see if a child knows the knowledge, then that's not always giving us an accurate picture. And so we've got to make sure that our role is to make sure that the parents are informed, not only in the school setting, but as outside the school setting as well.
Dr. Robinson, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry, man.
Thank you.
All the professionals, brothers before me, that was right on. Like building relationships, feet to the street. You got to go to the churches. You got to educate families sometimes where they're at. You got to meet them. Sometimes even within the context of IEP meetings, these teachers use big vocabulary words and half of them don't know what they mean themselves, you know? So why are they trying to sound pompous and all intellectual when in reality, they themselves don't know, you know? So I tell parents, you know, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if you don't know, you just ask. And one of the things that also we have to look at is that why are IEPs written in a way where it's all behavioral management, you know, therapy, communication, which are all fine. But in reality is that I tell parents is that you have to ask specific questions around the IEP about the SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, result bound, time bound. And most importantly, does race play a role in your son or daughter's identification and instructional programming? Because if you look at the IEPs of young Black boys specifically, it's majority behavior. And so they're not learning in class to read. And so, again, parents sometimes may not know the questions to ask. They might feel intimidated. And so even for myself, when my cousins asked me to go to their son's IEP, I go. And I have no problem putting teachers on blast, because you're not going to sit here and tell me that my cousin is slow, stupid, is at risk. No. You're at risk from not taking a chance to work with them. So, you know, it's all within the eye of the beholder. And I just think that, you know, as a young brother said before me, we have to build a community. It takes a village, you know, churches, boys and girls clubs, big brothers, big sisters, whatever we have to do to get to the masses of people to really help them understand the process of IEPs and how to hold schools accountable. I think parents have more power than they realize.
Spot on, brother. We have to empower the parents, man. And, you know, we got to be realistic too, right? Because it's generational. And sometimes the parents aren't prepared, right, for a myriad of reasons. I'm just going to keep it real. I taught my mom how to read. My mother and father didn't graduate high school. They both got GEDs. My dad, when he was 16, because he lied about his age so he can escape Flint and go to the Marines, go to Vietnam to get out of Flint. My mom, I was at the university. I was at EMU when I taught my mom how to read. I'm just going to keep it 1,000, right? But my mom advocated for my brother, who they tried to pigeonhole. She may not have known what the heck they was talking about, but she was like, no, what y'all saying is not right. What y'all saying is not true. And I give one last example of why empowering the parents is key. My son, him and me and his mom didn't get married, but we were together for 5 years, right? When I met her, she had 2 kids, and her oldest boy was 4 years old when we met. And Belleville, Michigan is where they go to school, graduated from. My son will be a sophomore at Belleville High School next year, right? But because of, various dental problems that kids have, right? So they may mispronounce words. So when they evaluated him to figure out will he be in kindergarten or special ed, right? Like they do all kids apparently, right? They wanted to put him in special ed. I say, no, that's fine. That was like in March for the upcoming school year. I say, no, y'all gonna reevaluate him probably in August. And I worked with him, and his mom supported me with that. And when he showed up in September, they was like, he don't belong in kindergarten. He needs to be in the 2nd grade, right? This kid that they wanted to put in special ed he's at Michigan State right now on a full ride academic scholarship in biochemistry. But they wanted to put this kid in special ed because he was mispronouncing words. And the only reason he was is because teeth was growing in. We know how it goes. So we have to empower the parents, and we have to understand that if the parent may not have these skills themselves, we still must empower them. So that means brothers and sisters like ourselves, we need to go to them schools and go to them communities. I make it a priority. Here in Robinson County, North Carolina, I done probably went and gave hype up read the book, the library is awesome and all that stuff at probably most elementary, middle school, and high schools in this county, right? And the teachers always want me to come back because they always say, before you came, such and such, little Jamar, little Kari, just wouldn't read. And now they want to go to the library all the time. And I tell them, it's because y'all are devaluing what they want to read, right? Comic books, there's nothing wrong with that. They can read that and gain skills. For example, if they like music, then they can read their hip hop magazines. If they like cars, let them read those magazines about cars. And the parents had to be empowered and say, hey, my son may not, my son or daughter may not like that, but we're talking about black males, may not like that, but they like cars. Then yes, buy them magazines, get them books about things that they are interested in. We have to empower the parents, right? Because parents, like has been said, they go to these parent-teacher conferences and they're overwhelmed. Teachers using these fancy words and they like, we don't even know what the heck that means. Like I say, my mom, if my mom don't understand what the heck you saying, then who are you really talking to? And that's just my perspective on that. That we give up on them too soon. We give up on them too soon. We have to empower the parents. No matter if they got a PhD or a GED, we have to empower them.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for that response. I mean, that just takes me back to elementary school. I tell people all the time, shout out to my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Deacon. She would always go to her own library because our library wouldn't let us take any books home and give us books that were things that we wanted to read. She would ask us, what are some of the things we're interested in, and actually brought us books on those topics. And that's really how I learned to read. That's how I started to learn, or I should say I began to showcase my love for reading, was in her class because she did those things. So what Dr. Walton is saying isn't just this made up thing. It actually works. I'm living proof that it works because it's worked in my life. I also want to say there's been a lot of comments, and we're going to go to the last question before going to the parent, going to the questions in the chat. I have about 6 questions here, so it's been popping in the comment section. But I just want to say, parents, sometimes we think that parents don't care because they don't show up. And my research specifically shows that Black parents specifically, they do care. They just show that they care in different ways. And so one reason why they may not show up is because they don't know what to ask. They feel intimidated. They have past traumas that prevent them from wanting to go into the school. Their expectations for what schooling is different than what white America believes schooling is. Schooling for many Black people could be that the school is the expert. I'm sending you to the expert. You go learn from the expert. Don't disrespect the family. Don't disrespect the teacher and come back and tell us what you learned. They also could be working multiple jobs, and taking off will reduce the income because they're already having problems making ends meet. So those are the things that I found just in my research, studying how Black parents show that they care. So I just always have to share that with people because they think that absence means lack of care, and it's completely opposite. They show care in different ways. And so with that being said, I just want to go to the last question I want to ask before we get to this pop-in comment section, is can you talk to us about what's been your proudest moment as an educator?
It's kind of a hard question. That's a hard question to answer right now. My proudest moment, being in early elementary, I feel like I don't always get to see the benefits of the results of what I put in right away. But I will say that some of my kids have already graduated high school since I've been teaching. And I did have a student who came back to my school when my first year teaching. He's coming from a predominantly white school, and things just didn't go right over there. So he came to me, to my classroom, and I built a rapport with him and his family. And then I actually saw this student last spring at a superintendent's sort of recognition luncheon or dinner. And he came to me. I didn't recognize who he was. He came to me and he just said, "You don't remember who I am, do you?" I was like, "Well, if you tell me your first name, I might." So he told me his first name, and then I said his last name. And then he came to my waist in second grade, and he was like 6'4" at that point. But he was valedictorian. He received the full ride to Howard. And we just kind of talked a little bit about his experiences in my classroom in second grade, which was eons ago compared to being a senior at that point. And for me, just being able to have the satisfaction that I was a part of this, right? I put some kind of seed into that, and now I can see it grow. Another one is just kind of funny anecdote was a parent told me that her son was, a white parent said that her son came to her room in the middle of the night, told his mom that he was sad. And she said, "Well, why are you sad?" And he said, "Well, I will never be Black like Mr. Humphrey." So for me, that's just a funny thing that being the first Black male figure in a Black male teacher in this student's life, Black and white, or even in that building, not only am I being a role model to my Black boys who are there, but I'm also setting a representation of, like, this is who I am. This is me representing Black men across America to white kids and white families, right? Because they may not always have that experience as well. So those are just two quick things that I can think of. I'm sure if you give me more time, I can think about some other moments, but those two kind of just ring a bell right now.
I'm gonna go right off what Mr. Humphrey said about being, like, in my district, I'm the only first Black male administrator. So I'm the one that, like, the kids can see, they had a representation where they can see, okay, this is, Mr. Cooper's a Black male, and it's their first time actually, connecting with a Black male. But I'm at the elementary level, and I got so many proud moments. I mean, at the elementary level, you get nothing but love. I mean, you get your cards with the little pictures on it. Hey, Mr. Cooper, here goes a cookie and all of that. You get all the good stuff. But there is no moment prouder than seeing one of your former students graduate. I had that happen to me just actually a week ago. Young man who I taught in fourth grade. Before he came in, you get the rundown. He's just, special education student. It's going to be like this. He does this. Get ready for it. And man, that young man, me and him connected in fourth grade. I mean, he was awesome. He was awesome. And then about a week ago, I get a message on Facebook like, "Thank you, Mr. Cooper." And I'm like, "Thank you? What you mean, man? You did this." But he, just for him to reach back and just remember just the moments that we had and stuff like that. That's what I'm in education for. I'm in education for if I can just have an effect on a child's life. That's what happened with me. we're special here, guys. You know, it's not many Black educators, Black male educators. And through my whole time, I had only one Black male educator in my whole K through 12 experience. And then I had a Black female. But to have that effect, man, that's huge. Like I said, I got in this to make a difference. And that all started with my brother, who changed my life and told me, like, man, don't follow that. Be you, be different. And, you know, we can get in this double consciousness, as W.B. Du Bois talks about. And once again, just showing our kids, you know, you can be you, you know. So that has absolutely been my proudest moment. And I can go on and on again about the cards and pictures I get from my little kids and all that type of stuff. But by far, seeing one of your former students graduate is by far the proudest moment.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. I think the proudest moment, you know, is seeing them graduate, you know, not only graduate but go out and be productive citizens. To me, that just says a lot. And, you know, I'm that type of person where I'm going to take the credit. You know, I'm going to tell the child, I'm going to say, yeah, you did that because of me. You know, I'm going to tell them that. You know, I know their parent may have played a role, but no, I'm going to take the credit for it, because I feel like as a Black male, we change lives. You know, and it's not easy, especially because I feel like with being an educator, the pressure as a Black male is on you more than it is some of your counterpartners. And so being able to see those students, and, you know, my first year of teaching, I taught 11th and 12th grade students. And so many of those students were just, they'd say, well, I'm not taking the ACT, I'm not going to college. You know, I made it a point to make every one of my students take the ACT. And I said, whether you go to college or not, you're applying to go to college. You know, I remember sitting in the classroom saying, we're going to take this day to write essays. And, you know, I'm going to make you apply to college. I'm going to make you, you know, apply for financial aid. And now seeing, and that's been years ago, seeing so many of those students who have graduated, who have become nurses. You know, I know one who's an attorney. And, you know, just to go from saying, I'm not going to apply to go to college, to now you are a productive citizen. So definitely seeing those, you know. And funny story, when I moved back to Jackson, I was sitting in the barbershop, and the barber was cutting my hair, and one of the other barbers walked up and he said, "You remember me?" And I said, "You know, I remember your face, but that's about it." He was like, "Yeah, you were my middle school 8th grade teacher." He was like, "I still remember what a gerund, I remember how to use a gerund, I remember all that stuff." He was like, "You know, it paid off. I'm a barber, but I tell my people, no, you don't talk correct English when you're around me, because you taught me that." And so, you know, to me, that's just a proud moment. Being an educator, you get to see you literally get to see the rewards of it. May not be immediate, sometimes it is, but it pays off in the long run.
Yeah, I think for myself, I think I might have a little different perspective, given the fact that in Wisconsin here, I just keep it 100. You know, the institutions that warehouse Black boys in special ed don't allow me opportunity to come in and work with them. So as my pastor said, Frank Smith, you know, feet to the street. I start literacy programs at churches. And so the last 2 summers I've had opportunity to teach 10, 15-week reading courses for families and kids. And let me tell you, to me, it's beautiful, man, when you give kids hope, when you see hope in their eyes and you light that fire underneath them, and, you know, they learn to read, and they just, you know, the light clicks. It's powerful, man. It's for me, one of the most rewarding things in life is able to plant the seed in a young man or woman's life who has had no hope academically or just, you know, personally. And so being able to teach reading outside of the school system to families is powerful. It's transformation, you know, transformative. A lot of things that are not happening within some of these school and buildings. So, you know, I see him in the community and they say, "Dr. Robinson, you know, I took your class. Thank you so much." So for me, if I can help a kid learn to read, you know, and parents too, I die tomorrow, I've lived a good life. So I'm just blessed to be able to plant seeds in young minds.
Indeed, I can't say anything that the other brothers hadn't said, because we've all had those experiences, and those are our proudest moments as educators. But I would just want to throw in, you know, when I see my former students continue to strive for their dreams, the students I had in elementary, the students I teach at the university, where they attribute to me that they didn't lose hope just because I was I stepped in their life for whatever brief moment that was, that they hadn't lost hope. But if I had to give two examples, I would say my proudest is when my son texted me and said, "Dad, my older brother Josh just got a full ride scholarship to Michigan State." Because I remembered, the story I already told and how they tried to pigeonhole him. And then the next one will be when I was at the university level, when I was teaching at Eastern Michigan University, a kid from Saginaw graduated from Eastern Michigan, Rashid Atwater, and he was in the Army at the time when I had him as a student, and he was just saying how he was struggling and he just felt like no one was giving him the support. And he took me for African-American studies, intro to African-American studies. He ended up majoring in it. Now he's a PhD student at Temple University. And when he shot me an email and said, "Dr. Walton, I want to be a Black Studies professor. What should I do?" And when he called me and said I got accepted to Temple, that was probably my second proudest moment as an educator.
Wow. Yeah, that is definitely that's definitely something. I think graduation and then living and seeing your students be productive citizens and achieving their dreams are like among some of the proudest things that we can do as educators, because that's really what we are here for, right? So I'm going to go to the viewers' questions. There are actually 8 different questions here now. I don't think we're going to have time for all 8 of them. So I'm going to ask a few of them and then let the panelists over the next day or so can go into the comments and respond to your questions from in the comments directly themselves. Before I do that, I want to say that based off what I've heard today, I would just think it's very important that I share with people that my philosophy around education is fixing the system. And so one of the things that we typically do in education is we try to fix the student. We pin all the problems on the student instead of looking at the system and what the system is doing to create the problems for the students. And so it's important as educators, education leaders, and those who are in the policy field around education to look at how do you change the system to create more students' achievement. And so I think we heard that today from some of our panelists. So the next question I want to ask has to do with your students and what they receive at home. And so for your students, how do you, as educators, help combat or change those racist narratives that are taught from home, but more importantly, that may not even be taught at home? It's just taught from television and things that they watch, that they have collected over their lifetime. Mr. Humphrey? Or actually, for these viewers' questions, by the way, I forgot to say, I'm sorry. We don't, everyone doesn't need to answer all of them. They don't want to. And also for those of you who are just tuning in, this is Perspectives with Black Men. We are covering educating our young Black boys and young men. And we have 5 panelists here. One, we have Mr. Humphrey from Ann Arbor, Michigan, Mr. Cooper from St. Paul, Minnesota, Dr. Stevenson from Jackson, Mississippi, Dr. Walton in North Carolina. I don't even know what city, I forget. Sorry. And then we have Dr. Robinson, I believe in Madison, Wisconsin. So Mr. Humphrey or anyone, do they want to take that question?
I think it's oftentimes people think that if you don't talk about race, it's easier that way and then you're not being racist. But it's really important that you do talk about race. And you can't combat things by shoving it under the rug, right? So you have to have open conversations about race. And I can't dictate what happens at home. What I can dictate is what happens in my classroom, what happens in my building. So in my building, in my classroom, we're gonna have these conversations about race. And I think people don't really give students or kids the credit they deserve. I mean, kids are intuitive, they're smart, they know right from wrong, right? So we can just kind of put things out there, and then they will begin to discern, wow, wait a minute, that's not right. This is what it should be. And then they can then in turn become little advocates themselves, which will then turn into adult advocates. I've had a couple experiences just as a teacher, watching students in second grade have these dialogues about race. And they come to me wanting me to interject to prove someone right and someone wrong. So what I did was just pose questions, right? So I want them to kind of think things through and then kind of have conversations amongst themselves. But I think for me, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, having conversations about race. You cannot sweep it under the rug.
And I'm going to jump in here just really quick. Absolutely. We can't control what's at home. But going back to what we said before, us as Black men in education, you know, how we show up, you know, how we are. To even also go along with that, it's histories and histories of a negative representation of Black males. I mean, going all the way back to the birth of a nation, 1915, going all the way just to see how things in media are portrayed. That once again, it's about opening up, though, like Mr. Humphrey said, not being afraid to have those discussions and opening up and having those conversations. So absolutely right on all those things and being able to address those things. You know, kids are real. Kids are going to be honest.
Hey, another quick point I want to make is that as a role model, I'm a role model at all times, and I possess integrity at all times. I've seen situations where, or I've been in situations where a child may make racist remarks. And to me, some stuff it's learned behavior. And, you know, we got to consider all the circumstances. Why is this child doing this? If that's all you've been around, that's what you've been raised on, then sometimes that may be all that you know. And I feel like when you know better, you do better. And so my job is to educate you. Yes, we have to have that conversation. But I'm still a role model. You know, you may call me out my name or whatever it is. I'm still a role model. And I remember one student in particular at a school that I worked, he was constantly using the M word towards students. Now, I never heard him say it, but he was constantly using it towards other students. And, you know, the students, well, they weren't going to take that. And so just having a conversation with that student and showing him that, you know, I'm a role model. I'm a nurturer. I'm gonna help you like any other child. You know, whether you look like me or whether you don't look like me, my job is to be a role model, point blank, regardless of who you are. And so constantly working with that child, showing him that I'm going the extra mile. And I remember his parent came and attended a meeting, and his dad began to get unruly and to call me something out my name. And the student immediately jumped in and said, "You will not talk to him like that." You know, I just feel like when we are a role model, we cannot dictate what goes on at home. But what I can dictate is what goes on in my building. I can set those standards and the expectations where it will be embedded in my students to know my standards, to know my expectations. And if they see a parent coming in and they're not abiding by my standard, I don't even have to say anything now. The student will jump in and handle that.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure if I can say much more that has been said already. Is that, you know, when I do PDs with teachers, I tell them the same thing. You know, you can't control what happens outside the building. You can't control what happens in the household, but what you can have control is your classroom setting and how you want to respect these kids and have a conversation, open dialogue by listening to them first, but also sharing some insight about, you know, the world. And so, you know, I just think that communication piece is important. You know, just got to have effective communication about the world and about how to navigate a system that might not be always, you know, open to you.
And I'm just going to go 10 seconds in. As a history professor, I teach the history teachers, K through 12, right? And I teach Black history. African history, African American history. So my contribution is to equip those future teachers, black, white, gay, straight, man, woman, whatever, on actually rooting them in history so they can have dialogues with their students, understanding with their students when students have questions, when they have a terrible textbook and they can supplement the textbook related to race relations in America and the history of race relations in America. So as I said, my contribution is to teach the teachers true history regarding the Black experience globally.
Yes, thank you very much. I think you all hit the nail on the head with that question. So I'm gonna just go ahead to the next question. If you could just talk to us about how do you think we as a nation change the narrative around the low number of Black males going into education? Do you have any suggestions for school board leaders, for example, or school districts? I actually just did a training today for all of the Ohio School Board Association on that, and that's a question that came up, and it came up again here. So as school building leaders, how do you suggest districts work at that? And Mr. Humphrey, if you want to go, if not, then Mr. Cooper.
Let me think about that one for a second.
All right, thanks.
One thing that I know, and I'm just speaking from here in Minnesota, is once again, the system is designed to do what it's supposed to do. And one of the biggest hurdles is the testing that I can speak here. Like I said, when I came to Minnesota, there is numerous of hurdles and tests to take to get into education and get your license to become an educator. It's tough. And then once again, it's not like there aren't Black men going into education, but then they're not allowed in the door for certain positions. So it has to be things that's changed within the district to make sure that those opportunities are happening and are presented. So those are two huge things, is making sure that we look at, as a state testing, and then also making sure that Black men are getting those opportunities that are presented.
I just want to say this: competitive wages. So many Black people go to college to change their whole family, to rise them up in economic standing. And, so that discourages far too many young Black males who attend the university from pursuing education because they view it as a poverty wage job. So we got to increase the wages for K through 12 educators. They should be getting paid more, far more than what they're getting paid. And that discourages and deters far too many people.
I'll say this also, in Mississippi, we are some of the lowest paid educators. And so that's why you see the Black males who do go into teaching, they don't stay in it long. They typically move up to administration. And someone said it earlier, the state testing, you see a lot of them struggle with the state testing, trying to pass the test, the demands to become licensed. We don't have educators knocking on the door by any means. So if you can get someone, why not get them and work with them to teach them the basics of what they need in order to be successful? And another thing I've seen, and talking to quite a bit of Black males, we automatically think, and I'm just saying we as educators in particular, we think that because they're a Black male, they can automatically deal with the other Black males. They can relate to them. So let me pile the worst kids on them. They can deal with them. And that's not always the case. And I've never been a fan of that, giving the worst kids to one particular teacher. No, I'm gonna spread the love out so that we all have the same burdens as everybody else, or whatever they may say. No, we're gonna all, because I feel like at the end of the day, you gotta be able to establish a relationship with all kids, not just the good kids, or the ones you identify as the problem kids or the disciplined kids. kids. So that's one thing. We've got to stop making sure that the Black males that do come into education, that we pile them up with what we identify as the worst kids.
Yeah, real quick, I have a special issue in the Journal of Economics, Race, and Policy, and one of the articles in there by Wilson, Dantzler, Evans, and McGregory, their title is "Do Racial Disparities Exist in the Labor Market for Educators?" And they look at disparities between Black and white. And so as this conversation talked about, the labor market, that's important, man, really the access and preparing, teachers, even maybe high school think about the labor market. So all this conversation is very critical around this topic.
Real quick, Dr. Akbar. Another thing is once you get a Black male teacher in the door, the next piece is the retention, right? So then how do you retain these magnificent individuals? So you have to put some programs and things in place to support them as they go through this educational journey, because we talked about earlier, we're working inside of a system that's not necessarily built for us, right? So it doesn't always allow for creativity, because there are things you have to abide by. So we have to think about, well, how do we retain these Black male educators once we have them?
Thank you very much. That's a great point. You all make some great points. And Dr. Robinson, if you can drop me that article link, I think it'll be very helpful for some of the conversations that I'm having. As a school board member, we work with our board and our districts to think through some of these complex topics as we set policies and goals. And so sometimes it requires us to expand our knowledge base because not everyone on our boards are educators. So, and even though I am educated, I've never even heard of that study. So I definitely want to be able to read it and possibly use it if it makes sense. So we have many other questions. So I'm going to ask one last question, but also want to acknowledge that there was another question about how to make parents feel comfortable coming to the school, acknowledging that they may have their own past traumas, which I talked about some information from my research. How can I, as a white parent, help support families of color with children with dyslexia and ELA children? And then where do you see African-American students on the autism spectrum fitting into the dominant narrative? So if you can go back into the chats and provide that response, that'll be great. But the last question I'll ask you is around reward versus punishment. So what are your thoughts around this concept? And do you feel as though students respond more to reward or punishment when it's awaiting for them after a certain action?
Personally, I think that society is going to be a punishment all on its own. So for me, school is not a place for us to be thinking about punishment in a sense. What we need to be thinking about is how can I, as I mentioned earlier, motivate a student, and that motivation can eventually turn into an intrinsic reward for that student. So we have the extrinsic, which is the outside, and we have the intrinsic rewards. So I'm more so of a fan of finding motivators to help with intrinsic rewards as opposed to punishment. I just feel like punishment for me, they're going to go through life. They're going to have to they're going to be exposed to different things that are unfair to them going through life anyway. So for me, I'm not in the business of punishing students.
And I say the three most important things in education is relationships when it comes down to it. It's of course you want to build those, exactly what Mr. Humphrey said, building that intrinsic motivation, but then also we're educators, so we want to teach. So it's not about punishment, discipline, teaching and having those relationships with kids. In the end, I think is going to be a huge response to get the best out of your students.
We go to work every day because we know that we're going to get a paycheck. I mean, let's just be realistic. That's why we go to work. We love what we do, but we also know that it comes with a paycheck. And so I think nowadays, we have to keep in mind that the generation now is not the same as when we were going to school, or, you know, they don't necessarily behave in the same manners that we behave. Some of us went to school and we wanted to learn. You know, we know if we didn't, then when I got home, mom and dad was not going to deal with it. So we went to school and we did what we were supposed to. You also had those kids, you know, who didn't. They came and they joked around and they played. At the end of the day, no child wakes up saying, I want to be a bad student. I want to get in trouble today. I want to get on, you know, my teacher's nerves today. No child wakes up thinking that. They don't go to school with that mentality in their head. And, you know, and as somebody said before, parents send us the best that they have. So my thing with the reward is, if I can motivate and encourage you on the front end, then I don't have to punish you necessarily on the back end. So yeah, I'm one that's all for rewards, because I want to be rewarded. You know, let's just be realistic. You know, not necessarily just with a paycheck, but I want somebody to pat me on the back and say, hey, good job, what you're doing. You know, those intrinsic, you know, motivation, yes, but also you need those extrinsic things to keep you motivated as well. And so definitely the reward. And when I say, I don't believe in punishing a child. I believe there are consequences to your action. But to me, to say a punishment, you know, if I say I'm punishing a child, that means I was not proactive on the front end. And I put the blame back on myself. So if I'm proactive on the front end, I don't necessarily have to punish you. I can show you that there are consequences to your actions. And so as opposed to getting those consequences, I would rather reward you.
Yeah, I think, as the brothers touched on before, you know, relationships, communication, for me too, those things, but just love, man, you know, planting the seed of love into these kids, and knowing that for myself, I love them like I love my own kids. You know, I want them to be successful. I want them to live life to the fullest. I want them to, you know, live their dreams out, chase their dreams, regardless of what the world tells them or shows them. And so for me, the relationship, communication is just pouring love in these kids. Those are things that I think are very important for me.
All right. Anyone else want to answer that? If not, I can't remember if Dr. Walton answered at all.
Hey, Dr. Akbar, I just want to add this one thing that I thought about. When you have a relationship with a student and you have those expectations for a student, and one thing I've learned is that I don't necessarily have to say anything to that child when they know that they fell short of my expectations. You know, I've had students who will come to me crying. I'm like, what's the problem? You know, before they even get in trouble, they'll say, look, I didn't have a good day. I'm sorry. I know when you really have a relationship with students, you don't have to punish them, literally. They feel so bad themselves that, you know, it takes care of it. And to me, that's all about when you really build a relationship with a child.
Right. Thank you very much. Anyone else want any final thoughts before we end? I can't remember if Dr. Walton said anything or not.
Well, I didn't say anything about that because them brothers had it all together. But on the last final thoughts, we just got to love, care, show empathy for these kids and for these young men, if those of us who are teaching at the high school or the community college or the collegiate level. We got to show love, compassion, and empathy. And that's my final thought. Love, compassion, empathy.
Thank you, Dr. Walton. You actually stole the last question, which is, you know, any final one statement that you want to make before we leave here, Mr. Humphrey.
I think for me is you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't teach who you don't know. So you have to get to know who you're educating. You have to get to know your craft. So you just got to go in head first and do your very best. And I think Mr. Cooper mentioned it, relationships, which is all coupled in love as well.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper?
Yeah, same thing as Humphrey said, man. I do this once again. It's about changing lives. That's it. I mean, we have the ability, the power every day in our lives to totally change a kid's life to, if he's going down the wrong path, then go down the right path. We could be educating the next president of the United States in our classrooms. I mean, what we do. So I'm just blessed. And also I'm blessed once again, guys. I love being in this space with you all. I appreciate it. I learned so much tonight, but once again, we got to make sure we continue to build those relationships with our kids.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Stevenson.
Just one thing I always think about every day that I reflect. I always take time when I'm driving home and I reflect. Did I do everything in my power to make sure my students were successful? And that comes to when I put a teacher in front of those students. That's when I'm dealing with a student one-on-one, when I'm dealing with a parent. Did I do everything in my power to make sure my students are successful, regardless of black, white, yellow, whatever? I try to make sure that I do. I take that to heart every day, and I take it personally when I know that I have fallen short of making sure that I've done everything in my power to make sure my students, specifically students who look like me, making sure that they are successful, that I set them up for success in their future. I've definitely enjoyed this. I tell anyone, whether I know you or not, if you're following me, even if you're not following, if you have a question about education, I'm here to assist, because we don't know everything. And sometimes it's best to ask those questions. And sometimes it's best to ask people who you don't know, who you know, they have knowledge of it, because sometimes we don't always, as parents, we don't always feel comfortable when we go into the school setting asking educators, because they may not look like us and they may not always have the best at heart for our child.
Yeah. Last but not least, Dr. Robinson.
Well, I mean, I don't have much to say that the brothers have already said, man. For me, it's just, again, giving kids hope and then making sure that the teachers understand also how to give kids hope and opportunities, because, hope is helping, O is for opportunity, P is for progress, and E is for empowerment. So we just got to give kids hope, man.
Wow. I think that's a great way to end this. Thank you very much to each one of these intelligent, powerful Black men who are educators, changing lives every day across this country, in Minnesota, in Mississippi, and Michigan, in North Carolina, and Wisconsin, who knew that there would be Black men all over in education in those fields. And so I want to thank each and every one of you for all that you do, for what you've been able to impart on all of us today, and really everything that you contribute to the field of education. Our presence is necessary. Our presence is mandatory. And so as a person who left the classroom to do something else and still staying in education, I value all of you who stay in the buildings and do the work that you do because it's necessary. And it's very hard work. I tell people all the time, the hardest job I ever had was not being in the Army. It was being a teacher, a classroom teacher. So people really underestimate how hard it is to do that job. So I don't have that luxury of not knowing and not respecting the work that you do. So to everyone out there viewing, thank you very much for participating today and being here with us. We definitely appreciate you joining us. Again, this is Perspectives with Black Men, our voices, our experiences, our solutions. And this is a 10-part series on race and racism that we experience as Black men in this country. And so part 9 is on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the same channel, Perspectives with Black Men, hosted by NJ Akbar. And so you will see that here on Sunday, and we will be having a conversation with allies on Sunday. So this is a rare thing that might not even happen in any other episode we do with Perspectives with Black Men. We will have a conversation with allies, women, and individuals who are white and not or not Black men coming on the show to talk about their support for Black men and the success of Black men and raising the perspectives of Black men in the spaces in which they are in. And so we're excited to have three confirmed guests. We will likely have a fourth, but we will have on our show Keith, Paul, Jason with us on Sunday. We'll also have my good friend, the newly minted Dr. Shatina Jones joining us, and possibly two other individuals joining us. So stay tuned, stay blessed, and remember, we're about changing lives and fixing the system, not the students. And so whatever you can do in your own spaces and places to look at the system and examine the system and begin doing the work on the system, that's what I encourage you to do. And whatever you do, as Tabitha Brown, one of my favorite people on social media, says, don't go around messing up anybody else's day. So enjoy your day and have a great evening. Thank you very much.